everyone. This is Jen Davis with MAPS Coaching, and welcome to Family Reunion 2022. Today, we are here to talk about how do we win the buyer and win the offer in 2022. So the reason that we want to go over this is clearly it's been a little bit of a challenging market for those of you working with buyers over the last year to year and a half. And we want to set you up with some best practices. How do we make sure that we're going to have a successful buyer business in the next 12 months and really setting ourselves up for the next 2 years, 3 years, right? So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we are being proactive instead of reactive. So we're going to dive into the content and hopefully we'll set you up for some success with your buyers over the next year. So let's jump in. Okay, so winning the buyer and the offer in 2022. The first thing that we need to understand are that the predictions are in the pipeline. What do I mean by that? So always when we're looking at building out a great business, it's how do we have a great business plan? How do we make sure that at the end of the year, we've hit every goal that we've hit for ourselves? The number one thing that we can do as an agent, specifically as a buyer's agent, is look at what our pipeline is. How many buyers are in our pipeline? How many people have actively raised their hand and said, I want to transact in real estate in the next year. I want you to be my agent. Or maybe have just softly reached out and raised their hand and we haven't yet connected with them. What does a great pipeline look like? How many people do we need to have in our pipeline? So when I look at a pipeline for a buyer's agent, traditionally speaking, so take off the last year to year and a half, and traditionally speaking, you needed about 3 to 1 right now buyers for your goal. So what do I mean by 3 to 1? If we wanted to put 3 buyers under contract in the month of February, we would need to have 9 A buyers. 9 buyers that are ready, willing, and able to move forward with us as their agent in order to secure 3 contracts. Now, what I've noticed over the last year to year and a half is that number has adjusted a little bit. We may have those 9 buyers and we may have more than 3 people writing an offer. However, we're struggling on the negotiation side. And so when I look at a buyer agent's pipeline, right now I'm saying we really need double what we used to need. Think about that, double what we used to need. So we need 18 buyers to find the 3 that are going to go under contract in a month. So you may be looking at that and saying, Jen, I don't need to have that, or I can't manage that many buyers. What we have to understand is the difference between a ready buyer and a willing buyer. We may have a buyer that's ready to move forward. We may have a buyer that said to us, gosh, you know, we're pre-approved. We've signed our buyer agency agreement with you, and we would love to purchase a house in the next month. The thing that sets a buyer apart right now on how to be an A buyer with us is, are they willing? Are they willing to do what it takes to compete in today's market? And so you have to understand what the difference is. We have to understand what questions to ask to establish, is this just a buyer that they're ready, they're giving us all the right signals that they want to purchase a home right now. And then the difference between someone that, yes, they're ready and they're willing to compete. The willing to compete part is the doing whatever it takes to negotiate on a house. Are they prepared to compete in today's market? And then we have to understand the value of our follow-up plan. If I'm telling you that we've got to have 18 buyers that appear on paper to be an A buyer, a ready, willing, and able buyer, we can't possibly hope that just by kind of doing a drip campaigns here or there on them, that they're going to stick with us. Those 18 buyers that maybe aren't willing to compete in today's market still need a follow-up plan so that when they become ready to compete, that we're still in front of them. So we have to understand that we hear that saying all the time, fortune is in the follow-up. Understanding that right now it's the single most important thing. We have to be able to determine, number one, who we should be working with right now, and then how to follow up with those that aren't right that aren't right now buyers and aren't willing to compete right now, and understanding the difference between the two so that we can accurately put them on a follow-up plan. Understanding that we can utilize those smart plans, we can leverage kind of those automated systems, but at the same time, people are looking for connectivity. They're looking for the relationship between themselves and their agent. So understanding what the healthy balance is between, a smart plan and some sort of a touch, whether that be a phone call or a text message or an in-person meeting. And then we have to be constantly interrogating the motivation and willingness of our buyers. What do I mean by that? If I'm looking at these 18 buyers and probably of those 18 buyers, maybe 9 are willing to compete right now, but of those 9 that are willing to compete right now, 3 or 4 really are the only ones that have the means to compete right now. They have the ability to do what it takes to get that offer. We have to be able to understand that within our pipeline of buyers, they're constantly adjusting and moving around. They have different factors in their personal life, in their business life, that are going to adjust that motivation and willingness. So what do I mean by interrogating? It's having the conversation with your buyers. It's understanding from the strategy session to the showings to the point that they're actually going to write the offer, that we've got to be constantly making sure that we're in an alignment with what their willingness and motivation is. If we get it wrong, that's sometimes where buyer's remorse will creep in. Or if we get it wrong, that's when we can occasionally miss the opportunity for them to secure their perfect home. So constantly reevaluating, talking to your clients and understanding exactly where they're at in their process and in their mindset about purchasing their next home. And then, are you willing to do whatever it takes to hit goal? So if we're talking about the willingness of our buyers and the willingness of our clients to be willing to compete, are you as the agent willing to do whatever it takes to hit goal? What do I mean by that? So if I'm looking at what am I willing to do whatever it takes to hit goal? If I have only those 3 or 4 buyers that are willing to compete and have the means to compete in today's market, am I willing to do whatever it takes to find them a home? It's not just searching the MLS. It's being proactive instead of reactive. If we're saying that inventory is the problem, inventory is also the solution. So as a buyer agent, am I willing to look outside of the MLS to find my buyer a home? Am I willing to call a neighborhood that I know that they want to live in and make sure that I'm leaving no stone unturned in the search for them? Understanding that if I'm going to help get my buyer the best house at the best price, I may have to do things differently than I did a year and a half or 2 years ago. I may spend more time researching off-market properties in an effort to help them be successful in their quest for home ownership. So the next point, if we're looking at making sure that we win the buyer and we win the offer in 2022, the first thing is your pipeline. We have to have a very robust pipeline. We didn't even get into the number of B buyers that we're going to need to have. So those buyers that are on the cusp of being an A buyer, making sure that we're in communication with them, making sure that they are on a follow-up plan. But we've got to understand this pipeline is what causes us to be able to predict what we're going to be able to do in 2022. It's going to predict what our outcomes are going to be. With the strength of your pipeline becomes the strength of your ability to hit your goals. So moving on, how else do we win with buyers? It's setting great expectations. So when I talk to a buyer, I want to know what they understand about what's going on in the market. I want to ask the question, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, what do you know about today's market? What do you know about purchasing a home right now? And then I listen. I'm listening to what they say because I'm going to do one of 2 things. I'm going to validate what they say. So if they understand what's currently happening in the market, I'm going to validate that. If they don't have an idea of what's going on in the market, maybe they aren't sure of how competitive it is or how far over list price offers are actually going, then I'm going to educate them. So leaving that, starting the conversation with just that open-ended question, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, what do you know about today's real estate market? I have the opportunity then to either educate them or validate what they already know. I'm going to do that in a couple of different ways. Number one, if I'm going to educate a buyer, I want to make sure that what I'm talking to them about lands well with their personality. Some buyers like stories. They like stories about the success that you've had with other buyers, or maybe they need a story about a buyer that wasn't quite prepared to compete in today's market. So I'm going to tell a story of either a successful time or a time where maybe a buyer lost out because they weren't prepped to compete in today's market. So I'm going to use stories that are real-time stories of when a buyer participated all in and won the home of their choice, or maybe didn't participate all in and then had to learn a lesson. So when we look at buyers, we want to be able to tell a story of what today's market looks like for a buyer. We also want to be able to utilize numbers. We want to talk to them about market data. We want to come to them with actual information that they can digest. We want to give it to them in bite-sized pieces because we do this every day and they don't. We want to make sure that they feel very confident in moving forward as a consumer in today's market. With confidence comes conversion. So remember that with the quality of conversation that you're going to have with the buyer also is a direct correlation with the conversion that you're going to have when you meet with buyers. We read about in the book Fierce Conversations that the conversation is a relationship. It's never been more true than right now. If we're going to be a great fiduciary for our buyers, we need to make sure that we have great conversations with them. We also want to host a seller strategy session. So this, in the past, we called them buyer consults, right? We would bring buyers in, we would consult with them, we would talk about what we were going to do to find them a home, and time and expectations around, what the market was like. We've made a switch in our language pattern over the last year to year and a half with our buyers, and we've started calling it a strategy session because that's what it is. When we're meeting with our buyers ahead of going into the market and ahead of searching for homes and getting them to sign a buyer agency agreement with us, it is a strategy session. We're strategizing, how do we win the offer? We're strategizing, how are we going to approach this market? What are we going to do to set our offers apart? Because what we know is the perfect offer starts in the strategy session. Your buyers have to understand what's coming towards them so that they can compete in an appropriate way. If a buyer hasn't heard yet what it looks like to write the perfect offer, and then you go and you show them a house and they find that house of their dreams, and that's the first time that they've heard that they're going to have to go $20,000, $25,000, $50,000 over list price, they lose confidence in you, right? It becomes an emotional adjustment to what they expected to happen. So before emotions enter into it, before we've ever found the house that they want to make an offer on, we need to strategize with them of, when we find this, are you prepared to do this? So when I look at helping buyers agents right now, and it has been a challenging year to year and a half, I talk to them about, are you living as an agent in a seller's market? Do you believe that it's a seller's market and only the seller can win? Or are you living in a skill set mindset? If we are going to be a successful buyer's agent in this market, I challenge you to look at this not as a seller's market, but as a skill set mindset. Buyer's agents are still winning. Buyers are still securing the home. They're still represented a large majority of the time by a buyer's agent. How do you become the buyer agent of choice? It's by switching that mindset around. Let's look at it as though it's a skill set mindset instead of a seller's market. How do we adjust to that? It's by making sure that we have the best information possible. It's by making sure that we have a robust pipeline, that we're setting great expectations with our buyers. They know how long a home is going to be on the market before they start accepting offers. They know what it takes to write a successful offer. They know how quickly they need to get in and out of showings and make a decision. When we've got a great pipeline and we've set correct expectations, all of a sudden we'll start having more success with our buyers. And that builds into this skill set mindset. The team that I'm on, that I run, we closed over 250 buy sides last year. We still had an accepted offer ratio of almost 89%. We were able to do that in the hardest market, or the most challenging market of our time, because we didn't give into the idea of it being a seller's market. We looked at it of, there are still buyers that are winning. How do we make sure that we're working, number one, with the buyers that are willing to compete? And number two, how do we set the correct expectations so those buyers are prepared to purchase the home of their dreams? When I coach buyers agents, this is the next thing that we go through. We look at the opportunities for a buyer agent to improve efficiency and improve skill set. So what we know about transacting or helping a lot of buyers, right? If we have a goal of closing 50 buyers in a year, or 100 buyers in a year, or 200 buyers in a year, that it doesn't matter really how you look at it. All of these things are kind of the roadmap to helping a buyer. If you're a successful buyer's agent, we must go through this exercise. And so we look at it and we call it the hole in the hose exercise. And it's basically looking at all of the points along the way of when you're helping a buyer, of when we can improve efficiencies. So we start with lead generation and we hopefully end up with referrals. So when I look at this, I think, okay, if I need to help more buyers, or I want to help more buyers and I have really big goals, I have to look at where I'm at in my skill set of every step of the way. So number one, am I great at lead gen? Am I generating enough leads to support my business? If I'm not, that's the first hole in my hose. And until I plug the hole of generating enough leads, I'm never going to be able to work my way through the rest of this pipeline. So am I generating enough leads? Okay, great, I am. Let's say I'm great at lead generation. I spend the time that I need to generating leads, and I have this big pool of leads to work with. The next hole in the hose potentially could be my lead follow-up. If I spend all of my time generating leads, however, I kind of drop the ball on the follow-up, or I forget about them, or maybe my sense of urgency isn't there with how quickly I'm going to move them forward in the process, then that's my hole. If I'm doing a great job at lead generation, but I'm not following up with them, I'm never going to get them to this next step, which is the strategy session. So I have to figure out a way to plug the hole of lead follow-up. How do I build out smart plans? How do I set up reminders or tasks so that I make sure that I'm contacting or calling or texting these buyers in an appropriate time frame? How am I adding value to these leads when I'm following up with them so that they want to work with me as their buyer's agent? So we get those two holes plugged. We're generating a ton of leads. We're doing a great job at lead follow-up, and we get the buyer into the strategy session, and maybe we're not great at setting expectations. Maybe we're letting the buyer run the deal, right? Maybe the buyer is the one that's sending us houses, or the buyer is the one that's setting the time schedule, or they're the ones that are asking for showings at certain times. And we haven't set those expectations with a great strategy session. That's the next hole we have to plug so that we can be proactive with our buyers, so that we can be working with right now buyers. Setting those great expectations in the strategy session is what sets you up for a great relationship with your clients. Buyers don't want to lead. They want you to lead. They want you to be the expert. They're expecting for you to be the fiduciary. And when we do a great job with lead generation, we do a great job with lead follow-up, and we have a stellar strategy session, they feel confident in our ability to be the ones to find them the perfect house. So within that strategy session, ahead of moving into showings, we want to make sure that we're really comfortable getting that buyer's agency agreement signed. Why do we want to do that? Well, guys, if we were a listing agent, we wouldn't put a listing live on the MLS without having a listing agreement signed. We can't give our time and our resources to our buyers without having that agency agreement signed. We want to make sure that at the end of that strategy session, that they understand that we're working with them in an exclusive partnership to find them that perfect house. So understanding, practice the conversations, understand the document, role play it with someone in your market center or someone on your team so that you have the confidence to ask every time to get that agency agreement signed. And then we want to be great at the showings. How are we showing up at these showings? We're doing a great job on lead gen. We're doing a great job on follow-up. Every time in the strategy session, we're setting great expectations and we're getting that document signed. When we show up to showings, are we prepared? Are we making sure that we have the information needed to move the buyers forward? At the end of the showing, are we forward pacing our buyer to the next step? Forward pacing can be a couple of things. It can be moving them forward to write the perfect offer. If they don't love the home, it's forward pacing them back on your calendar to the next time that you can show them homes. What does that sound like? Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I'm so sorry that 123 Main Street wasn't the home for you. I feel like I have a better idea of what this home was missing, so that the next home that we take a look at will be the one that you're ready to write an offer on. Would you rather look Tuesday at 4 or Wednesday at noon? Guys, I don't have the next home that they're going to take a look at, but I'm forward pacing them on my calendar. Two things have to happen at every showing. We either write an offer, we regroup on criteria, and set them on the next showing. So the two things, we either are writing an offer on the house that we showed them, or we have regrouped with them on the criteria. We've figured out why this house didn't work, and we preset the next appointment. We're moving the buyer through our pipeline so that it's on our timetable. We don't want to collect a lot of buyers, or that lead follow-up gets much harder. If we're holding on to a lot of buyers in our pipeline and we're not moving them forward in negotiations, it's very hard to have a great plan for lead follow-up for the people that you haven't even shown houses to, because you're bogged down with the buyers that you are showing. So making sure that we're using best use of time and we're pushing those buyers through that pipeline so that we're moving them through so that we can bring in the next round of buyers to fill in that pipeline. Okay, so we're now doing a great job, right? We look at these opportunities of improving efficiency, lead generation, lead follow-up, strategy session, getting those agency agreements signed. We're forward pacing our buyers from the showings. We've done it. We get to the point where the buyer is getting ready to write an offer. How strong are your negotiation skills? Are your buyers truly prepared to do what it takes to secure the offer? Are you willing to do what it takes? What do I mean by that as an agent? I mean, are you calling the listing agent? Are you having a great conversation with them? Are you listening to what the seller wants so that you can make it a win-win deal for the seller and your buyer? Are you having the conversation with the listing agent to best prepare your buyer for how to write an offer? Or are you shooting them a text message of, hey, listing agent, we're sending over an offer on 123 Main Street? Are you willing to dive in and make sure that you're doing everything possible to be the best fiduciary for your buyer? Okay, so we set up our buyers for success, and they still fall short. They write a great offer and we miss out. We do everything right. Are you going back to the drawing board? Are you asking the listing agent, Mr. and Mrs. Listing Agent, what could we have done differently? What did it take to win this offer? Are you talking to your buyer and saying, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, what do you think potentially we could have done a little bit differently to have secured the property? Are you prepared to do that next time? Are we constantly interrogating, we talked about on the first slide, the motivation of our buyers and the willingness? After they lose one house, are they willing to make an adjustment? After they lose one house, are you willing to make an adjustment? Are you willing to go try and find them something off market? And are you willing to show up differently in those negotiations to help them secure the property? The next step, we've done all of this right. We're so excited. Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer. We've got you under contract. Next is we've got to get you through inspections, appraisals, and get you to closing. From negotiations to closing is the biggest opportunity to provide that 5-star customer service experience so that your buyer wants to give you the next step, which is the referral. So we've got to make sure that our communication level is on par during this time. It's scary for a buyer. They've competed in multiple offers and they've won. They have very little that they can ask the seller to do. And we've got to make sure that we keep their excitement level up so buyer remorse doesn't sink in. We've got to make sure that we're over communicating with them so that we're buttoning up the transaction so that we very easily get them from under contract to closing. Once we get them to closing, can we ask for that referral? Are we willing to ask for that referral? I challenge you, if you're not asking for a referral or you're not asking for a review, do you believe that that indicates what customer service you believe you're offering? I do. I believe if we're not willing to ask for a referral from every client that we're helping, that's a pretty clear indicator of how we think we handled the consumer experience. When we change the mindset of, I'm going to provide a 5-star customer experience so that I can expect and ask for a referral, it changes our business. How much easier would it be to build your pipeline with a pipeline of people that are friends and family of your raving fans? Guys, this is Jen Davis with MAPS Coaching. I hope that you are going to just kill it in 2022 with those buyers. I'd love to hear about your success. If you have any questions for me, my email address is jendaviskw@gmail.com. Also, I run a program called the Mega Buyer Agent, where we go do a deep dive into this kind of hole in the hose exercise. Would love to have you participate. If you have any questions for me, don't hesitate to reach out, and enjoy family reunion.